Does architecture need to be built to actually be valid? While I was studying for my degree in 2008, the housing crisis was in full blast, full gear on, plucking architecture offices left and right. And not much was built, and a lot of ongoing projects, well, they were frozen. So, what did architects do? Well, they did what they always do in times of struggle. They sat down and they drew fictional architecture. Something that is not meant to be built, but meant to provoke a viewer, into a conversation. We call this paper architecture. And as a student, I honestly disliked it quite a bit, as I considered architects who lean on paper architecture to be inferior to those who actually build stuff, who actually make things. But these days, it seems that, well, that's the only architecture that I actually do. So I guess I now like it. I'm not sure. Not sure why, but I find great value in architecture that is not meant to be built, but rather asks the question, what if, right? Maybe it's a coping mechanism. That could be true. Maybe I grew into it naturally, but most likely it's because of one dude whose drawings are inspiring me to this day. I'm talking about Lebbeus Woods. More precisely, his High Houses project that I want to highlight as the coolest building that I know. In this case, coolest building that was never built, I guess. Let's start with the guy. Lebbeus first got his degree in engineering and then didn't get his degree in architecture. And I guess he didn't really need it in the end. Started off as a renderer for big boy companies in early 1960s New York. So you can guess that in early 1960s, the rendering was probably not done in V-Ray and Unreal Engine. Pencils and watercolors. Yeah. This kind of job paid very well, so he saved up a bunch of money and then quit to do his own little thing. Well, back then it was little, then it grew. So if you want to know how you can focus only on paper architecture, well, the answer is pretty simple. Be rich. Just be rich. Just be rich. Anyway, Woods worked with post-traumatic cities, trying to see how communities could live in them, how structures could be assembled differently, given the non-typical conditions of those kind of places, and so on. For example, I very much enjoy his interpretation of an urban scar, so to say. A portion of a building is reconstructed with the same materials as are used for the rest of the building. Only the arrangement of these materials is different from the original. Similar to how human skin heals, how human skin tissue heals and leaves a scar on it. Rebuilding while showing that something has happened in this space, I don't know, it's simple, but that makes it pretty nice. I like simple, pretty things, I guess. Oh, and if your teachers or some architect that you know tell you that Lebbeus was a deconstructivist, they have no idea what they're talking about. His structures are all about the act of construction. They're organically built by people, one element at a time. Thus, there's no starting body for the fragmentation that the construction has to happen, right? It's rather radical constructivism. Whoever says that it's deconstructivism have only looked at the pretty pictures and made assumptions. That's that. And sorry, we're going off track. This is Cool Buildings That I Like series, so I should talk about, well, cool buildings that I like. Enter the High Houses. These bad boys are proposal which is a part of reconstruction of Sarajevo, which should be a part of reconstruction of Sarajevo, after the siege of the city that lasted between 1992 and 1995, if I remember correctly. Their site is a messed up tobacco factory, and their concept is very, very simple, actually. These houses, they rise up high above the city into the city airspace, right? That has been previously, during the war, during the siege, it was occupied by mortar shells, right? That were fired, I guess, from the surrounding mountains into the city. And by doing so, the city is using these houses to take back that space. The city itself, the city of Sarajevo itself, is an organism growing back into a space that was left empty after the war. The houses, they structurally they balance on these bend tensioned beams, right? I believe circular bend tensioned beams, and they are stabilized by the steel cables that initially give it a resemblance of a catapult. A paradox of kind of wanting to fly, but also being anchored to the ground. This paired with balls of steel and patience required by the inhabitants of these houses draws a pretty cool lyrical bridge to the challenges that people of Sarajevo will face or faced trying to reinvent the city that was completely transformed during the, the deconstruction or the destruction that happened during the war. Even though these buildings were never built, nor should they, we do have the next best thing to look at: a physical model. Look at this beauty. Just look at it. Every part has been solved, every surface has a purpose, and drives the narrative even further, right? This is such a good physical model, and the tectonics they're awesome, they're great. That's actually a pretty important part. Going through all material, you can really tell that Lebbeus was a pragmatic engineer. All of his forms, while they are really crazy, show a really high attention to assembly logic, structural detailing, and tectonic principles, right? And that I find to be amazing. So, does architecture need to be built to be valid? Even if your answer is yes, I think high houses have never aimed to be valid. It's simply not an important question to a building or a project as cool as this. I'll see you in the next one. Later.